بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الحمد لله الذي له ما في السماوات وما في الأرض وله الحمد في الآخرة وهو الحكيم الخبير والصلاة والسلام على المبعوث إلى كافة الورى بشيرا ونذيرا وداعيا إلى الله بإذنه وسراجا منيرا أبي القاسم محمد وعلى أهل بيته أئمة الهدى ومصابيح الدجى الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا. أما بعد فقد قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في كتابه الكريم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم لا يمسه إلا المطهرون. صلوا على محمد وعلى محمد. My respected elders, brothers and sisters in Islam, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. I'd like to begin by offering you all my condolences on the martyrdom of Amir al-Mu'mineen, Sayyid al-Wasiyyin, Imam al-Muttaqeen, Ali ibn Abi Talib, salawatullah alayhi. And as this night is the night of Mawla Amir, and it is also the night of Qadr, I decided to choose a topic that would cover both the life and the martyrdom and the works of Imam Ali alayhi salam, and related to the night of Qadr, which is of course the night of the revelation of the Quran. And therefore my topic for tonight is understanding the Quran in the light of Nahjul Balagha. So inshallah this topic will incorporate both of these events that happened on this night. Now, just as an overview of Nahjul Balagha, it is unfortunately one of those books that is not as well known as it should be in our communities. Nahjul Balagha, first of all, the actual name, Nahj in Arabic means clear way, and Balagha means rhetoric or eloquence. So it is called this because the compiler, Sharif al-Radi, which I'll talk about later in a bit more detail, he wanted to collect all of the sayings of Mawla Amir al-Mu'mineen, but those sayings which were of a very high eloquence. So he didn't choose all of his sayings. He chose those ones which were of poetic quality, of high literature quality, and he wanted to collect these ones, the most eloquent sayings. There are three parts to Nahjul Balagha. There are sayings, sermons and letters of Imam Ali alayhi salam. Now there are about 150 commentaries written on this great book, and it is something which has been called the words of Mawla Amir that have been described as being lower than the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but higher than the words of ordinary people. This is a famous quote from none other than someone called Ibn Abil Hadid. He's regarded as perhaps being the most important commentator on Nahjul Balagha. So Ibn Abil Hadid, he says the words of Imam Ali are Duna Kalamil Khaliq wa Fawqa Kalamil Makhluqeen. They are lower than the words of Khaliq, of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because obviously they're not verses of the Quran, but they are higher than the words of any created being. They are higher than any ordinary human being. So, bearing this in mind, let's have a look briefly at who this Sharif al-Radi was. He's known as both a Sayyid al-Radi and Sharif al-Radi. Both are correct, and it's the same person. Sharif al-Radi, Sayyid al-Radi. He's someone who died in the year 406 AH, so about 1,000 years ago. And he compiled Nahjul Balagha, like I said, all of those eloquent sayings and letters and sermons of Mawla Amir. And he was not an ordinary scholar himself. He himself was a great writer and a great scholar in his own right. His brother was none other than a Sayyid al-Murtaza. Sayyid al-Murtaza, who's known as Alam al-Huda, one of our greatest jurists and one of our greatest theologians. And his teacher was Sheikh al-Mufid. So this just gives you an idea of who Sharif al-Radi was. Now, to illustrate this further as to how he even began to be taught by Sheikh al-Mufid, there's a very interesting story where he has a dream. Sheikh Mufid, he has a dream, and in his dream comes the Holy Lady Fatima Zahra salawatullah wa salamu alayha. And behind her are Imam Hassan alayhi salam and Imam Hussein alayhi salam salawatullah wa salamu alayhima. So when they come to Sheikh Mufid is in the mosque and he is teaching his students as usual in this dream, and the Holy Lady sits in front of him and she sends forward her two sons, and she says to Sheikh Mufid that, "Oh Sheikh, teach my two sons fiqh." Now Sheikh Mufid wakes up and he's perplexed. What does this dream mean? Perhaps the Holy Lady is warning me that I have become too proud of my learning. And he cries the whole night. He cannot understand what this dream is all about. So then the next morning he goes to his class as normal. He starts teaching in the masjid. All his students are there. And in the middle of his lesson, a very respectful lady comes. Now, she has with her two children of hers. These people, all three of them were Sadat. Her name was Fatima bint al-Hussein. And she comes and she sits in that same spot that the Holy Lady Fatima sat in the dream of Sheikh Mufid. Then what does she do? She sends her two children forward, just like in the dream. And she says, "Oh Sheikh, I desire that you teach my two children fiqh." So now it all makes sense to Sheikh Mufid, why he saw that dream, what that dream was all about. It was in a way of the Holy Lady Fatima telling him that teach these two people, these two children fiqh, teach them well. There must be some wisdom behind that. Who were those two children? Who did they become? One was Sharif al-Radi, the compiler of Nahjul Balagha, and his elder brother Sayyid al-Murtaza Alam al-Huda salawatullah wa salamu alayhi. So this gives you an idea of who this compiler of the Nahjul Balagha was. Now, to develop this further, let's ask the question now, because we want to see the understanding of Maulana Amir in Nahjul Balagha of the Quran, and how Nahjul Balagha helps us to understand the Quran better. So first question, let's start right at the beginning. When we talk about interpreting the Quran, explaining the Quran, doing tafsir and exegesis of the Quran, the first question is, well, does the Quran itself need explaining? We have verses in the Quran that tell us it is nur, it is light, it is guidance, it is tibyanun li kulli shay, it is an explanation of everything. So why does the Quran need any guidance, any explanation anyway, any interpretation? Well, of course, at one level, the Quran is all of these things. It is nur, it is hudan lin nas wa bayinatin min al huda wal furqan. It is guidance for the whole of mankind. It is clarification of everything. But that's at one level. And that level, everyone can understand, everyone can benefit from it, everyone can get guidance. But the Quran has levels of meaning. And it is to understand the deeper levels of the Quran that we need extra guidance by people who understand it fully, by people who are connected with the Quran in a very special and a very spiritual and intimate way. As Maulana Amir says himself, Innal Quran zahiruhu aniq wa batinuhu amiq. Look at the words. Look at this poetic quality. This is just one saying. You can tell it's almost like a poem. It rhymes, it flows, there's a rhythm to it, there's a melody to it. ظَاهِرُهُ عَنِيقٌ وَبَاطِنُهُ عَمِيقٌ. Who else can talk like this? So what that means is, indeed the Quran, its zahir, its apparent aspect is aniq. Aniq means elegant, it is beautiful. But its batin, its inner aspect is amiq, meaning it is deep. We have another tradition from Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq sallallahu alayhi, where he says, Inna lil Quran zahiran wa batina. Indeed, the Quran has an outer aspect, a zahir, and it has a batin, it has an inner aspect. So, it is for these inner aspects that we need extra guidance from certain people who are able to understand those inner aspects really well and then explain them to the rest of us. So this is why we need interpreters, although the Quran is guidance at one level. When we look at the verses of the Quran itself tells us that it needs explaining. In Surah Al-Nahl, verse number 44, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually describes Rasul al-Akram sallallahu alayhi wa sallam as an exegete, as a mufassir, as an interpreter, an explainer, a commentator on the Quran. How does he do this? He says, وَأَنزَلْنَا إِلَيْكَ الذِّكْرَ لِتُبَيِّنَ لِلنَّاسِ مَا نُزِّلَ إِلَيْهِمْ وَلَعَلَّهُمْ يَتَفَكَّرُونَ. He says that we have revealed to you, meaning, oh Holy Prophet, we have revealed to you the dhikr. Dhikr here is one of the names of the Quran. So we have revealed to you the Quran, so that what? لِتُبَيِّنَ لِلنَّاسِ مَا نُزِّلَ إِلَيْهِمْ. So that you clarify for the people what we have revealed to them. So if the Holy Prophet is being instructed to clarify for the people what has been revealed, it means the Quran does need clarification. It does need explaining. It does need interpreting at that deeper level. Otherwise, why would Allah tell him that we have sent it to you so that you do this? And so that the people may reflect over it. وَلَعَلَّهُمْ يَتَفَكَّرُونَ. So this tells us that actually the first interpreter of the Quran was none other than Nabiul A'zam himself. Now, of course, he would do this in different ways. He would explain the meanings of the Quran. He would define words. He would illustrate concepts. Sometimes practically he would demonstrate the details of the verses. The verses, they don't mention all the details. So he would say, pray as I pray. And then he would demonstrate the prayer. He would demonstrate wudu and so on and so forth. He was the first exegete. Now, where do the Imams come in? Well, of course, the Imams, the infallible A'imma, because they are the rightful successors of the Prophet, they were also charged with this duty. That after the Prophet, just like he had to clarify for the people, they also had to continue clarifying, explaining and interpreting the verses of the Quran for others. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So now, let's have a look at this in a different way. Why do we say that they are the best interpreters of the Quran? Well, for this, we need to consider the concept of ayat. Ayat means, of course, signs. Literally in Arabic, ayat are the signs. But usually, when we come across ayat, what do we normally understand when we talk about ayat? It's the ayat of the Quran. Okay? So now, let's examine this concept of ayat and how it helps us to understand why the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam were the perfect and the best interpreters of the Quran. And then we'll see from some examples from Nahjul Balagha. Well, what is a sign? If you were to define what a sign is, an ayah, what is a sign? A sign is something that when someone perceives the sign, they perceive the message behind the sign, isn't it? This is what a sign is. When somebody looks at the sign, they are given some information. Now, I don't know about here, but in the UK, all drivers will know that if they see a sign which is a red circle, and in the middle there's a bar, a horizontal white strip that goes across, that means something in particular. I don't know if any of you know what that means, if you have something similar here, but all drivers in the UK know that that means no entry, right? You cannot enter there. So that's what a sign does. By looking at the sign, you get the message behind the sign. It gives you some information. So now, what is an ayatullah? I don't mean those scholars in Qom, in Najaf. An ayatullah is a sign of Allah, right? So, how does this help us to understand why the Ahlul Bayt are the greatest interpreters of the Quran? Well, like I said, verses are known as ayat. Why are they known as ayat? Now we understand. Because when we look at those verses, they tell us a message. They tell us about God. They tell us about godly things. Behind the ayat are messages for us. So, the Quran is a collection of signs of Allah. How about people? Can people be ayatullah? Can people be the signs of Allah? Of course they can be. If they display in their words and in their actions godly things, then they are ayatullahs. Because when you see that person, when you hear that person, he reminds you of God. He tells you about godly things. His character is godly. So that person is giving you a message behind himself. So he's a sign of God. Now, when we look at it like this, we see that the ayat of the Quran and the ayat who are the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam are telling us exactly the same thing. They are telling us all about God and godly things. So, we have a saying from Mawla Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib salawatullah wa salamu alayhi. He says, Ma lillah ayatun akbaru minni. There is no greater sign of Allah than me. Now this is not obviously a boast. This is haqiqah. This is the truth. He's trying to make people aware of his status. There is no greater sign of Allah than me, he says, because I am reflecting godly values and godly teachings. In the ziyarah, what do we recite in the ziyarah? Assalamu alayka ya ayatullahil uzma. When we refer to Mawla Amir in the ziyarah, we say, oh, peace be upon you, oh, great ayah and sign of Allah. So, when we look at it like this, we begin to understand why they are the best interpreters of the Quran. Because on the one hand, the Quran is the written reality of the Ahlul Bayt. The Ahlul Bayt are the living reality of the Quran. The Quran is the written word of Allah. The Ahlul Bayt are the living word of Allah. The Quran is the written guidance of Allah. Ahlul Bayt are the living and human guidance of Allah. And the Quran, it has the signs of Allah. As a book, it's a perfect book of ayat. The Ahlul Bayt are the perfect human ayat. Therefore, when we look at it like this, we realize that they are telling us exactly the same thing. So when we say the Ahlul Bayt are the best interpreters of the Quran, it's because they tell us the same thing as the Quran, except they are in the living form and the Quran is in the written form. So we have Kitab Tadweeni, the written Kitab, and Kitab Takweeni, the living Kitab. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Another way to look at this is when... Another way to look at this is if we see some of the statements from Mawla Amir in the Nahjul Balagha itself. Verse 192, Sermon 192, what does he say there? This is one of the fada'il of Mawla Amir, which is sometimes not spoken about enough. We talk about so many of his fada'il. One of his virtues is that every year, when Nabiul Akram sallallahu alayhi wa sallam would go to worship in the cave of Hira. Every year he used to go there to worship. There was only one person who would ever accompany him. Who was that person? Of course it was Imam Ali alayhi salam. He was the only person who would go with him when he was going to worship. Then what does Mawla Amir say in this sermon 192? He says that I would see the light of revelation. I would see the light of the prophetic mission. And I would smell the scent of prophethood. And then he says, I would even hear the cry of shaitan when revelation was revealed upon the messenger of Allah. He was there. He was seeing all of this happening. And then he would ask the Prophet that, what is this cry? And the Prophet would say that this is the cry of shaitan, for he is despairing of being worshipped now. When revelation would come down, there would be a cry of shaitan. Only two people ever heard this. It was the Holy Prophet and his rightful successor, Mawla Amirul Mu'mineen, Ali ibn Abi Talib sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Indeed, the great Mufassir Ibn Abbas, he himself, look how he describes it. He says that because Ibn Abbas, despite his greatness, he was taught by Imam Ali. He says that in comparison to the knowledge of Imam Ali, he says, my knowledge and the knowledge of all the companions is like a drop in the seven seas. This is the knowledge of Mawla Amir. Even Zarkashi is a Sunni scholar, a well-known Sunni scholar. He says the most outstanding mufassir and exegete and commentator of the Quran is none other than Imam Ali. It's acknowledged worldwide, across the world, that Imam Ali was the most learned in the Quran. So now, let's have a look. What do the verses of the Quran tell us itself? Does the Quran tell us that the Ahlul Bayt were the best interpreters of the Quran? And then we'll see some examples from Nahjul Balagha. Salawatullah wa salam alayhi. When we look at the Quran, we see, for example, some verses, they actually point to how someone can better be in contact with the Quran. It's all to do with the issue of purity. Now, when we look at the verses, first of all, Surah Waqi'ah, verse number 79. The verse that I recited at the beginning of this lecture. La yamassuhu illal mutahharun. This means that only the mutahharun, only those who have been purified, touch the Quran. Okay? La yamassuhu illal mutahharun. Now, when we say touching the Quran, some people might say, well, this refers to the fiqhi rulings that we have. We all know we cannot touch the verses of the Quran unless we have wudu. Unless we are mutahhar, we are purified, meaning we have wudu or ghusl or tayammum, depending on what our duty was at that time. So, la yamassuhu illa mutahharun, no one can touch the verses of the Quran unless they have purity, meaning wudu. Okay, that's one meaning of it, and our fuqaha use it for that as well. But, how about if we look at it in another way? This is all to do with the outer aspects of the Quran, isn't it? If we want to touch the outer aspects of the Quran, meaning the words, the letters, what is printed there, we must have outer purity. Outer purity means we must have wudu. But we can look at it in a deeper way. How about the inner aspects of the Quran? We said that the Quran has a zahir and a batin. The batin is amik. It has many deep internal layers. How can somebody touch those? Well, la yamassuhu illa al-mutahharun can also apply there as well. First of all, when we talk about this, let's see, does the Quran tell us who has that inner purification that can touch the inner aspects of the Quran? Of course, we are told in Surah Ahzab, verse number 33. إنما يريد الله ليذهب عنكم الرجس أهل البيت ويطهركم تطهيرا. So here we are told that the Ahlul Bayt have this purity because this refers to a thorough purification, a total purification. So now we put the two together. Only those who have been purified can touch the Quran. Fine. It applies to all of us at the outer level, at the manifest and apparent level. But only those who have been purified internally as well, spiritually, meaning they are ma'soom, they are infallible, only those can touch the internal aspects of the Quran. The internal aspects of the Quran are what? Those inner, deeper meanings. So this is why we say the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, because of their internal purification, they are able to have contact with the inner aspects of the Quran. If they are able to have this type of connection, then of course they are the best explainers of the Quran. And this is why we say that indeed the Ahlul Bayt with Mawla Amir as well, they are the best explainers of the Quran. Now, I'd like to gradually draw this part of the lecture to a close before we mention a few words of Masahib. But before I do so, it'll be very important to give an example from the Nahjul Balagha as to how Mawla Amir explains a verse of the Quran at a level that no one else could have. Believe me, it is really remarkable. This example that I'm going to give not just explains one of those inner aspects, because he's been thoroughly purified by Allah, he's ma'soom, and he has connection with the inner aspects, but also it will illustrate how Nahjul Balagha, it really is the peak of eloquence. It really is the most beautiful text we have in Arabic language after the Quran. So, this example relates to a verse in Surah Qasas, verse number 5. وَنُرِيدُ أَن نَمُنَّ عَلَى الَّذِينَ اسْتُضْعِفُوا فِي الْأَرْضِ وَنَجْعَلَهُمْ أَئِمَّةً وَنَجْعَلَهُمُ الْوَارِثِينَ. This means Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying that, and we wished to bestow our favor on those who were deemed weak in the land. And we wanted to make them a'imma, we wanted to make them imams, and we wanted them to be the heirs. Now, perhaps you know what this verse is all about. It relates, of course, to the story of Nabi Musa. Nabi Musa, this verse was revealed about him because, remember, the Bani Israel were very weak. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, with His guidance, He was able to make them very strong. He was able to guide Nabi Musa so that he defeated Fir'aun, and he made them triumphant over the land. Okay, so this is one meaning of the verse of the Quran, and many people have said this, that yes, this is about the Holy Prophet Musa and what he did with the Bani Israel. But now let's turn to Nahjul Balagha. When we look at what Mawla Amir says about this verse, we see that he takes it to another level altogether. What does he say? First of all, in Arabic, he says, لِتَعْتِفَنَّ الدُّنْيَا عَلَيْنَا بَعْدَ شِمَاسِهَا عَطْفَ الدُّرُوسِ عَلَى وَلَدِهَا. It's so even difficult to translate, never mind trying to understand the meanings of this, but I'll try my best. What he says is, first of all, the translation. Let's see what the exact translation is. He says, the world will incline towards us, meaning the Ahlul Bayt, after it had become very obstinate, very stubborn. After it was very stubborn to us, it will incline towards us. Like what? Like a biting she-camel is, that affection that a biting she-camel has for her calf. Now, what does this mean? This is Nahjul Balagha. One of the most difficult texts to understand, to translate, and to even try to explain. What this means is that he's actually talking about another time. He's saying that this verse has more than one application. The original application, the apparent application of this verse is with regards to Nabi Musa and the people of Bani Israel and defeating Fir'aun. Yes, that is the first and foremost application of this verse. But he's saying, don't limit it to that. I will tell you a deeper meaning of this verse. It's relating to Akhiru Zaman. It's relating to the time when the awaited Savior, Al-Mahdi Ajjalallahu Ta'ala Faraju Sharif, will appear. How does it work? Look how he explains it. He says that before he appears, this is the meaning behind it. Before he appears, the world will be very obstinate. It'll be very stubborn. It'll be against us, meaning that Ahlul Bayt. It'll be an enemy to us. Right? And he uses two metaphors in this language. Two metaphors of animals. The first is the word shimas. Shimas means a very stubborn type of horse. A horse which won't allow anyone to ride it. So look at the beauty of the Arabic literature and the skill of explaining. He could have just said in a very normal way, but that wouldn't have had the same impact. You know, those of you who are interested in poetry and literature, if you say something with metaphors, with similes and linguistic tools, it has a much greater impact. It stays. He says that it's like a horse that doesn't want to be ridden. This is how he describes the dunya before it turns towards the Ahlul Bayt. So stubborn, doesn't listen, doesn't want to do as what its master is telling it to do. So he's saying this is how the dunya will be first. But then afterwards, it will turn towards us. It will come towards us. Don't worry. There will be a time when the whole world will turn towards us, the Ahlul Bayt. Like what? Look how he describes it. He doesn't just say it'll come towards us in a very affectionate manner. He uses a second metaphor. He uses the word darus. Darus is a she-camel. A female camel, but not just any camel. A female camel who bites at her milker. When a camel has given birth, it obviously has milk. And it wants to protect that milk for its calf, right? So now, when somebody comes to try and get the milk from the camel is very defensive. It wants to protect the milk for the calf. So when the camel sees the milker approaching, it'll start biting at the milker, right? Meaning, go away. This is not for you. This is for my calf. Look at the linguistic skill of Mawla Amir. He uses this word, daruz, a female biting camel. So he's saying, when this camel does that, and then it turns to its calf, and it gives the calf its milk. What affection is in that? The picture we have is telling the milker to go away, biting at it, and then it gives its milk to its calf with love and affection. He's saying this is how the dunya will turn to us afterwards. With this type of affection, with this type of love. Now, of course, he could have said it in a very normal way. It will turn to us with affection. But look how he describes it. So, this is the point, my brothers and sisters. When we say understanding the Quran in light of Nahjul Balagha, this is Maulana Amir describing the verse at a totally different level. He's saying it has one apparent meaning, but ask me, I will tell you of its deeper meaning. فَاسْتَنْتِقُوهُ وَلَنْ يَنْتِقْ وَلَكِنْ أُخْبِرُكُمْ عَنْ. He says, ask the Quran to speak to you. Ask it. Will it speak to you? It will never speak to you, but I will inform you of his teachings. This is how he does it. This is why we call him Quranun Natiq, the speaking Quran. This is how we understand the Quran from the Nahjul Balagha. As a summary, therefore, when we look at Nahjul Balagha, we see that it truly sheds light on the Quran. We looked at the concept of ayat. This is why the Ahlul Bayt are the greatest explainers of the Quran, because they are telling us the same things as the verses of the Quran. The verses themselves tell us those who have this inner purity can explain the Quran better than anyone else. And we saw how others have also said how Amir al-Mu'mineen is the greatest explainer of the Quran. And then we saw an example from the Quran, from the Nahjul Balagha as well. Inshallah, this is something that is worthy of our reflection, especially on this night of Mawla Amir and on the night of Qadr.
Nara Haydari, Nara Salawat.
Sallallahu alayka ya Amir al-Mu'mineen. Sallallahu alayka ya Imam al-Muttaqeen. Sallallahu alayka ya Sayyid al-Wasiyyin. Tonight is a night when one Quran came down and one Quran went up. The night of Qadr is when the Quran al-Samit, the silent Quran, was revealed from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to us on this earth. But tonight is also a night when Quran al-Natiq ascended from this earth to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. For he was the speaking and the living Quran. The Persian poet puts it very beautifully. He says, Nagardad be kesi in sa'adat, be ka'be viladat, be mihrab shahadat. He says, this prosperity was not possible for anyone. Muyassar nagardad in sa'adat. It was not possible for anyone, this prosperity. That what? Be ka'be viladat, be mihrab shahadat. To be born in the Kaaba and to attain martyrdom in the mihrab. Someone who is born in the house of God and who was killed in the house of God. It tells us that this person's whole life from beginning to end was with God. Most people, when they are inflicted with wounds, they are crying out in agony. They are crying out in pain. They forget everything else. But Mawla Amir, when he was struck by that sword which was poisoned by the accursed Ibn Muljam, he only thought about God. Fustu bi Rabbil Kaaba, he says. This is when we say there's only one person who had this prosperity, to be born in the Kaaba, in the house of God, and to die in the house of God, because he was always with God. Indeed, it is reported on this last night of Amir al-Mu'mineen that the orphan children of Kufa, they had so much love for him that when they heard what had happened to Mawla Amir, they all gathered round and they heard that actually milk is very good for Imam Ali in this state. So what they did was they took their own milk and they brought it to Imam Ali in the hope that he would drink it and in the hope that he would get better. This is the love that he had for others and others had for him. Indeed, it's reported that they tried to find a doctor, the best doctor that they could find, an expert in wounds. His name was Athir as-Sakuni. They brought him over. Asir, he has a look at the wound of Mawla Amir. His head is split open. The poison is running through his brain. After he's examined this wound, he says to him, "O Amir al-Mu'mineen, make your will now. Make your will, for the wound has gone so deep, it's reached the depths of your head." So now Amir al-Mu'mineen, he turns to Imam Hassan and Imam Hussein. He says to them that do not take the life of anyone else apart from my killer. Make sure that if I die, then one strike for one strike only. If I survive, then I will be the judge. And he says that do one thing. Make sure you do not mutilate this person. You do not chop up his body. You do not desecrate his body. But I say, oh Amir al-Mu'mineen, if only the Kufans had taken your advice in Karbala. For in Karbala, look what they did to your son Hussein. You told Hussein not to mutilate the body of Ibn Muljam. But what did they do to the body of your son? On the day of Ashura, Umar ibn Sa'd, he calls out to his people. He says that who amongst you volunteers to ride your horses over the back and over the chest of Imam Hussein? Who volunteers to crush his bones? 10 people got up and they rode their horses onto the chest and onto the back of Imam Hussein. They crushed all of his bones to such an extent. You will recall the Lady Zainab's words on the 11th of Muharram as she went past the sacred body of her brother. How did she find her brother's body? Was it intact? It was totally mutilated. Look at her words. She describes for us how she found it. هذا الحسين بالعراء. This is Hussein lying bare-bodied. مرمل بالدماء. It is covered in blood. مقطع الأعضاء. All his limbs have been severed. They've all been cut off. But my brothers and sisters, now Amir al-Mu'mineen, after he's given this advice to Imam Hassan and Imam Hussein, it is reported that in fact this Asbagh ibn Nubata comes. He comes to Mawla Amir, but he's waiting outside the house with his companions, outside the door of Amir al-Mu'mineen. He hears the crying of the people inside, then they also cry. Imam Hassan comes out and he says that Amir al-Mu'mineen is saying, go home now. All the companions leave apart from Asbagh. Akbar stays. Imam Hassan says to him, I thought I told you to go. He says, how can I go? I want to see Imam Ali for one last time. Imam Hassan says, okay, wait. He goes inside. He comes back after a moment. He says, oh, Asbagh, come in. Asbagh goes in. Look how he describes what he sees. He says that I saw Amir al-Mu'mineen on the bed. He had a yellow cloth tied around his head, but all the blood had been drained from his face to the extent that his face had become yellow as well. And I could not tell which was more yellow, the cloth or the face of Mawla Amir al-Mu'mineen. And he says that I threw myself over him. I kissed him. I cried. Imam Ali said to me that, oh Asbagh, why are you crying? He says that, oh Amir al-Mu'mineen, I'm crying because I will lose you. Imam Ali says that I will go to paradise. But he says, yes, but I will lose you. That's why I'm crying. Muhammad ibn Hanafiya, he reports that when they were with Mawla Amir, Imam Ali was calling all of his children. He was saying farewell to them. And then people brought him some food. He didn't want to take the food. They looked at the lips of Amir al-Mu'mineen. He was just doing the dhikr of Allah. And then he says that he closed his eyes. Then he opened his eyes again. When he opened his eyes, he says that he called over his children one by one. He was bidding them farewell. But he had a special farewell for Imam Hussein. He says, oh Imam Hussein, oh Hussein, come to me. Imam Hussein comes to him. He says, Anta shahidu hadhihi al-ummah, ya Aba Abdullah. Oh Aba Abdullah, you will be the shaheed of this nation. Oh my brothers and sisters, I say to you, wasn't Imam Hassan also a shaheed? Wasn't all the other Imams also shaheed? So why does Imam Ali say, oh Abu Abdullah, you will be the shaheed of this nation? It's because his martyrdom was the greatest of all martyrdoms. And now about the Amir al-Mu'mineen, he closes his eyes, he opens them again. He says, this is Rasulullah. He says, this is my uncle Hamza. This is my brother Ja'far. These are the companions of the Prophet. These are the last moments of his blessed life. Then he's seen just to be doing zikr of Allah. Then he's seen to be facing Qibla. He turns his body towards Qibla. He closes his eyes for the very last time. Then he stretches out, he says the Shahadatain. He stretches out his legs, he stretches out his arms, and he says this, the last words he ever says, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, wahdahu la sharika la, wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluh. And then his blessed soul leaves this world. Ya Haydara. Now, my brothers and sisters, just one final incident I will narrate to you, because this tells us the status of Mawla Amir. This tells us about his great life and character. Some say that after Imam Hassan and Imam Hussein had buried Amir al-Mu'mineen, they were coming back after the burial. They saw an old man This old man was ill, he was blind, he was crying. Imam Hassan goes to him and says that, "Oh, old man, why are you crying?" He said, "For the last 3 days, I haven't seen someone." He says that, "Oh, every evening, this person would come to me and he would bring me flour and he would bring me milk. But for the last 3 days, I have not seen him. And that's why I'm crying." Imam Hassan asks him that, "Who was this person?" He says, "I don't know." And then he says, "Okay, describe him to me." He says, "I'm blind. I could not see his face, but I'll tell you some characteristics of this person." He says, "He was as kind to me as any mother is to the child." He says, "He treated me with kindness. He would laugh with me before he departed from me." Imam Hassan says, "Oh man, that was my father. My father has become shaheed and we've just buried him." وَسَيَعْلَمُ الَّذِينَ ظَلَمُوا أَيَّ مُنْقَلِبٍ يَنْقَلِبُونَ. Oh Allah, by the right of Amir al-Mu'mineen, by the right of this holy night of Qadr, we ask you to accept the following praise. Oh Allah, forgive us and our forefathers for our sins. Oh Allah, decree for us on this night that which is best for our dunya and our akhirah. Oh Allah, bless this place and all the people who frequent it. Oh Allah, enable us to live and die with the wilayah of the Ahlul Bayt. Oh Allah, enable us to always live and die according to the teachings of the Quran. Oh Allah, there are many people who are facing difficulty around the world, including those people who suffered all those hardships in that burning tower in London, and many others around the world. Bring them all relief, oh Allah. Oh Allah, we ask you to always help us in the path of spiritual perfection and make this not our last night of Qadr. Make this not our last Ramadan. And oh Allah, our last but not least prayer is that you hasten the appearance of the 12th Holy Imam. Ajjalallahu ta'ala farjah sharif.